Good morning, everybody. I'm ecstatic to be here. I tell people I'm very honored. This is my gift. This is what I love to do, and I'm honored to do. So I want to thank Amelia and Carolyn for helping me to be here, and to thank all of you. So I am of the Baptist tradition. I was raised Baptist. I was indoctrinated Catholic. Went to Catholic schools for more than 20 years. So I'm very obedient and guilt-laden. No, I'm kidding. So I'm very call and response. We're going to be interactive. Anything dead needs to be buried. That was one of my former pastor who passed away. One of his favorite things. And it's just nice to be nice. Those are the two things that we really talk about a lot that he shared with us. But without further ado, I'm going to jump right in. And again, if you have questions, comments, thoughts, just wave your hand. If every table doesn't have a notebook, make sure somebody back there in the back just throw notebooks on every table, because we're going to do an interactive activity that I hope will be a lot of fun and very meaningful to you as communicators. My background is television news. I served 20 years. No, I served more than 25 years. And I also did public affairs for Vanderbilt. So I empathize and understand on many levels what you do and respect what you do. So, Maestro, which video are we going to start with? I'm going to start with a video. I'm going to mix my book in, and we're going to look up, and this time is going to be gone. Because I understand after 10 minutes, eyes glaze over. So we're going to use video, we're going to use interactivity, we're going to use everything we can to keep us awake. I tease people all the time. My pastor, whom I love dearly, I tell him, I said, look, after 20 minutes, there goes your mother's board, there goes the deacon board, and I'm back there playing spades. So I'm going to try to make sure I keep your attention spans going. So I want to share this just in terms of the breadth of social media, and it relates directly to the Underground Railroad, and I'll make those connections momentarily. Thanks, Andrew. So from the giggles, some things stood out in your mind. So what stands out in your mind out of all the stats you just saw? What stands out the most? Anybody?
A baby named Twitter.
I know. I'm trying to, I'm just going to be quiet. I'm be quiet. I'm being recorded, so I have to behave, right? It's like, wow, really? It's a really moment. What else stands out to you? Yes?
Socialnomics.
Yes. Just that whole concept, the ideology behind that. Absolutely, yes.
People don't trust ads, they trust
Right, well, what do we always do? You call a friend and say who, did your yard, or who fixed your plumbing, etc. These are things we've done offline forever, but now online it's just a little bit different. And there's one back here, and I'm coming up here.
YouTube is a search engine. I never really thought of it that way. I know kids look for videos, but...
No, it is. I know. I do it all the time. I tell people to Google. That's why Amelia told me not to say a word, but I have to say this. My attitude now is, even when you introduce me, give me 3 sentences. You can Google me now. Before you needed to hear the background. But now if you're really interested, you're going to go look it up and go, okay, who is this person that came in here like a whirlwind and ran out like a tornado? Right? Yes?
Instead of searching for products, products will find us.
Absolutely.
I'm amazed by that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
It's such a mind shift. And we're going to talk about that through the Underground Railroad, because that mind shift was critical. And the challenge for us is we've been so indoctrinated for so long to think in a linear fashion. It is extremely difficult to think outside the box when you've been beaten into the box of submission. And now we're at an age where we have to think outside the box. We don't have a choice for our survival, for the survival of the next generations. I tell people all the time, I'm 45 years old. I'm not going to make it to retirement without understanding these tools and embracing this change. If I was a little bit closer, I might make it. But I've got a good, 20 years, so to speak? And professors never retire, so you already know that, right? Who else had their hand up? I don't want to skip anybody. Anybody else have their hand up? Yes?
50% of the population, world population under 30.
What does that mean to you as communicators? That one, as the preacher would say, you need to put a pin in it. Because 50% of the world's population being under the age of 30 affects what you do, whether you like it or not. Then it begs the question, how many of you have people in your offices under that age, working in meaningful positions, not being treated in a menial fashion just because they're younger? They may not know as much, but their contributions are supposed to be different. We weren't supposed to know what we know now, then. Okay? Who else had their hand up over here? Yes?
The Ivy League school in this short of time, so it moves fast and it collects a lot.
It does. The impact, the speed, Moore's law, he said everything would expand and increase 18 months, but we're faster now. You know, we're even faster in terms of technology and innovations. And a lot of the innovations that we see have already been other places for a long time. It just takes a while to get to us, the popular and general consumer. Someone else had their hand up? Yes, ma'am?
69% of the parents are friends with their children on Facebook.
Right, which is why a lot of young people are getting off of Facebook right now. And I'm serious, but people, you know, in terms of targeting your strategies and what you're doing, you need to think about that. They're on Instagram and Vine and Snapchat and other places that we are not. Vine is over? Okay, see, Vine's over. So Instagram, and they're evolving. WhatsApp, so they're going other places. However, as they age and they want to keep eyes on their children and grandchildren and keep up, the evolution will continue. So Facebook arguably will not disappear. Someone else? Anybody else have their hand up? I don't want to skip anybody, like I said. Yes?
One of the first stats was that the third largest country is Facebook.
Correct. If Facebook were a country, that's correct, in terms of numbers. And it's growing. These stats are old. My colleague and friend, Eric Qualman, whom I met through Twitter, and now video conferences my students, and I use his books in my class. Digital Leader is a great book to help you get your mind right in terms of understanding it. I know you're going to have a talk this afternoon, so I don't want to go too deep into social media. It's my passion as well as all the other things that I do. I love what I do, and so this is just me. People are you like that all the time? Yes, unless I'm asleep. I'm like this. The nuns did not like it, but I made it through. Okay. So, absolutely. Innovate. Lessons from the Underground Railroad. How in the world did you connect the Underground Railroad and the internet? Well, what had happened was I read a lot. You know, being a faculty member, you read a lot. I remember one day on my evaluations, my student said, "She's always quoting books." Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. But as I was reading, I realized the language that was being used shook me, because it was word of mouth marketing is new. I said, the slaves on the plantation did word of mouth, that's all they had. There was another one. Oh, the pioneering and innovative. And I said, well, who was more innovative than an African slave walking off of a plantation in the middle of the night, in the dead of winter, into the darkness, across a swamp, facing horses, facing slave catchers, facing other slaves, facing their fears into the unknown? Who was more pioneering? So how can we not explore those stories? So as I was reading, and I read, you know, Tribes by Seth Godin, and I read the other one, which one I was thinking about, Long Tail by Chris Anderson, and all these books over time, and realizing these narratives and stories were completely absent, as if they never happened. And I'm going, how does that happen? We can't do that. I also was traumatized at a very young age. I had to watch Roots when I was like 9 or 10 years old. And at that age, it was terrifying. To see Leslie Uggams, Kizzy, beaten, taken away from family, I mean, it was just permanent. And you wanted to watch it because you wanted to pretend you were grown up, but you were just sick the next day. After all, how many of you remember that experience? And so the original experience, actually watching it as a miniseries before cable. Yeah, I know. I know, right? So that experience stayed with me. And then learning the only person, well, let me ask a question. You ready for question and answer real quick? At your table, real quick. Name one conductor of the Underground Railroad other than Harriet Tubman. I'll wait. Oh, there's some hands up. No Googling, no Googling. I got a table back there. Nope, not an official. Not an official one in the research that I did, because she was younger, believe it or not.
Well, I know a stop. Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois.
Yes, yes. Okay. We know wrong answers per se, but yes, sir.
Gettysburg, two of them, Reverend Dobbin,
Yes.
and Samuel Simon Schmucker.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. That's bonus points. That's the one you want to put out the classroom, right? Show off. No, we're good. Thank you very much.
Not in name, but the Quaker community on Eastern Shore, Maryland.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. And that's where Frederick Douglass came through. Yes, sir. Frederick Bailey. I learned some things by reading. It was wonderful. I know. We'll talk about all these wonderful things. Anybody else have one? But I couldn't. I could not name any other conductor of the Underground Railroad. And life kept happening. You know, your steps are truly ordered ahead of time, and you don't even realize what you're doing when you're doing it. People say, oh, how'd you end up on the Underground Railroad? Well, I was at the home of Frederick Douglass because of the National Association of Black Journalists Convention back in '04 in DC. We visited that home. I was blessed to teach in London in '06, and I ended up at the home of Sir Walter Scott. I had never heard of Sir Walter Scott. We didn't study him in poetry, so I didn't know who he was. But they kept saying this poem, Lady of the Lakes by Sir Walter Scott. And as I'm there, I'm always the journalist. I'm always going to take pictures. I'm always going to take notes. So through every experience, I'm taking notes, I'm taking pictures, not knowing why. And I'm doing old school. I got a pen and paper, even today. You know, people make fun of me with computers. Yes, I know how to use them. I don't let them use me. Ooh, I just preached. But anyway. So, and I'm like this all the time. I tell people, they're like, you know, I speak the way I talk. I grew up on I Love Lucy. I grew up on Carol Burnett. I grew up a little bit on Mom's Mabley. I don't try to, but, you know, growing up, being exposed to all that, you cannot help but have a natural sense of humor. And so part of that's where that comes from. So you're kind of wondering. But so I was in London, and years later, reading the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, found out he got his name from Sir Walter Scott's poem. The lead character in his poem's last name is Douglass, and that's where Frederick Douglass took his last name. He originally was Frederick Bailey. Frederick Bailey. So if you ever have Jeopardy questions, it was Frederick Bailey, right? So I was blessed to be in that situation. Then a few years ago, I went to the American Press Institute Leadership in Disruptive Times seminar, and we ended up at the battlefield of Gettysburg. And of course, you know, being anti-military history, the Navy brat. This is being funny. My brother is the military historian in our family, and I never cared about it. He had the little green army men set up on the carpet and the rug, and I would knock them over because I was that little sister. So, but I'm at Gettysburg, and one of the foremost experts, if you ever get a chance, get to Colonel Vossler, and it's in my book too. Colonel Vossler explained the war in such a way that I could apply it. It made sense to me. So again, I'm sitting on the dirt taking notes, and people are going, why are you taking notes? I don't know. It's interesting. You know, I've been in school my whole life. I spent more than 22 years in school, so it's just natural, second nature. So that happened. So it's just all these pictures, all these stories, and the catalyst was a church trip that we took back in 2007 to Cincinnati. And I was able to visit the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. And if you haven't done that, that's something you need to do as well. I love to travel. And so, but it was a wonderful opportunity. And again, found myself on the floor, taking notes, had no idea they fed the slaves sugar on the transatlantic trip. So you wonder why African Americans may be predisposed to diabetes. I wonder, because that research hasn't been done. I know, I was like, wow, too. I'm sitting on the floor going, did y'all see this? Did y'all see this? I didn't see that before. So I'm screaming. Between that and the box that Henry Box Brown was shipped in from Philadelphia to Richmond, I would have died of claustrophobia. But he literally was put in a box and shipped with a hole in it. He ended up upside down, and he was successful. The second attempt was not, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But this is where it came from. So I promise you I was not smoking medicinal weed. I've been asked that question, like, how did you make these connections? So let's talk for a minute about the Underground Railroad really quick, and then we'll do another video, ask questions, jump up and down, it'll be time to go. So my premise in Innovate Lessons from the Underground Railroad is this. The Underground Railroad is among the most disruptive, innovative, and effective networks in U.S. history, and the internet is too. Dr. Clayton Christensen is a professor at Harvard University and has written many books and talks extensively about disruption. He is the father of disruptive theory. And he says disruption is something that appears outside of an existing system, is ignored, demonized, dismissed, degraded. It gets better. It gets better because it's ignored. It gets better. Then it disrupts the industry. Kind of like Craigslist smacked the newspaper industry when it came to classified ads. iTunes smacked the music industry, flat-footed. Now, people see these changes coming. but we choose to ignore them, which is so frustrating. But with the Underground Railroad, I'm glad they didn't pay attention to it. I'm glad they underestimated it. So when I talk about the lessons from the Underground Railroad, never underestimate your opponent. And that's a lesson our superiority and American arrogance doesn't always allow us to do. Because we always want to know more than someone else. And we just don't. We just don't. Not anymore, especially with the internet and being connected and everybody having access to information and other people having more motivation than we do. You know, when you're starving and you have to eat dirt, you're a little bit more motivated than when your poor people are overweight. I know, it's a deep, isn't it? It's coal miner deep. I'm gonna throw some wisdom out. You gotta catch it before it hits the ground. So, and as you look at the internet, it is a disruptive and innovative and effective network. We won't really be able to see its impact in our lifetime. It takes hundreds of years. Gutenberg's printing press, we really didn't understand the impact of that printing press till centuries later, if that makes sense. So, within the book, I created a framework, a way to finish the project, also as a way to organize the project. So I'm hoping that you'll feel free to use these 7 elements I'm going to give to you, and I'll repeat them enough that you can get them. But they're problem, principle, purpose, perspective, pioneering, passion, and play. And I will repeat them enough that we can all get them, or at least everybody at the table get one and put them together. Problem, principle, purpose, perspective, pioneering, passion, and play. And I forgot to say I'm at Dr. Syb on Twitter. I am a social media nut, so at DRSYB as in boy. So, problem. During slavery, there were so many problems. You know, you have a human being considered 3/5 of a person for taxation and representation. That was the only reason the slave power even wanted enslaved Africans to be counted. And I say enslaved Africans because this signifies those who were held against their will. There were some slaves who remained after the Civil War by choice. So it's a very distinct, different mindset between those two groups of Africans who came to America unwillingly. Ownership, access, privacy, boundaries, all problems on the Underground Railroad. What are we dealing with today? Ownership, access, boundaries, privacy. So if you start to think about our history and our past, there is a lot to be learned from those previous experiences. Ownership, online, how many of you are familiar with net neutrality? Okay, somebody tell me what net neutrality is.
One bite's the same as another bite. You can't decide to charge somebody more for sending one thing and not another.
Exactly. Thank you very much. I catch my students like that all the time. They'll go, we've heard it, we just don't know what it means. So fundamentally, what net neutrality means. Right now, we pay internet service providers. How many of you guys, raise your hand, have Comcast? AT&T? Verizon? Okay, who else am I missing? Xfinity? Time Warner? Atlantic Broadband? Okay, how many of you gotten rid of it? How many of you don't have it? It's hard to do because of the Wi-Fi. Because if you cut them off, they try to raise your prices on the others, so you're better off having the package, the bundle. What they want to do fundamentally is say, in addition to paying for just the access, that buried wire underground, which is what the internet is, believe it or not, just a buried wire underground. In addition to that, we want to charge you for the websites that come to your house. So if you're on Facebook a lot, or Twitter a lot, or LinkedIn a lot, we want to charge you more than the grandmother next door who doesn't necessarily use it as much. And that's the logic they're trying to use to get people to buy into this. But it's a very dangerous situation because then, in a way, you're giving those big companies censorship opportunities. Because then they're controlling what's coming through the pipe, not just the pipe itself. So when you hear net neutrality, you need to wake up. This is a freedom issue. This is an ownership issue. This is an Underground Railroad issue that we need to be aware of. So that's one of the ownership examples. Privacy. Talking about data and privacy. We'll mix the both. I'm going to do something very crazy, right? I'm going to give you my camera. Take pictures. Stand up, make us look good, not to know. Okay? I'm gonna go back up there, I promise, I'm sorry. Who owns the picture?
Good question.
It is a great question, because we talk about data. With the slaves, they should have owned themselves, but unfortunately in America, they were owned by other people, which is just, you can't even comprehend it. When we think about data, and we think about privacy, and we think about a simple photo, she owns it, by the way. The person who takes the picture, whoever hits the shutter, owns it. Why does that, and how does that become important? God forbid something happens to me, and that's the last picture of me, and it becomes valuable. She took it, she owns it. Make sense? Now, when you upload it, all bets are off. Because people access it, you got to read the user agreements, which is something we don't do. And they're not easy to read, deliberately. You know, the devil is always in those details. So, again, problems on the Underground Railroad: ownership, privacy, access, boundaries. Boundaries are shifting each and every day. We don't know where the limits are anymore. It's like a who moved my cheese. Every time we get one place, something's shifting. Rules change, policies change. As we're dealing with this epidemic of affluenza, and this person is so rich they can't handle being in jail because they raped a 3-year-old child. That happened this week. Somebody is not going to serve jail time because the judge said he can't handle jail. He won't survive in jail. Slavery. 1% of the 1% slave owners. We had 1% slave owners. That's what the slave power consisted of, 1%. What are we dealing with today? It's the 1%. And the challenge is, and was, and still remains, is us coming together. There's a deliberate effort to make sure blacks and whites never got along from a financial perspective, as we recognize the anniversary of the death of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who went to Memphis for economic reasons to bring people together across money lines, which is when he died. Didn't care about race. Didn't care less about that. But if you mess with money, it's a whole nother conversation. And I keep trying to tell everybody this: if you're in the room with me, you're not wealthy. The have and have not line is different. It's already happened. And so we have to think differently. So we need the Underground Railroad. We need a different mindset in order to go forward and to be successful together. So 7 principles. The first one is problem. Second one, principle. Principle. What do you stand on? And you can make these personal for your professional lives, personal lives as well. I'm utilizing the Underground Railroad because it just made sense to me. But the principle, the key principle, was freedom for everyone. Why? Slave labor was free labor. Slaves could not consume. Poor whites could not get work because they weren't free. Who really thought having more than 60% of your population unable to purchase goods was a good idea? Fast forward to the prison population. Nonviolent offenders, and I do mean clearly, nonviolent offenders. Not able to pay into Social Security because they cannot work. Not able to consume because they don't have money. Who thinks this is a good idea? We have to start thinking strategically and deliberately. On the Underground Railroad, another conductor, Levi Coffin. Levi left North Carolina and went to Richmond, Indiana. Many of those who were conductors who happened to be our white brethren were Quakers. Some were Presbyterian, some were Methodist, and some were Baptist as well. But a large number of those who assisted on the Underground Railroad happened to be Quakers. And Levi Coffin believed in helping a friend, no matter whom that friend may be. If a friend came to him, he helped a friend. But he did not go to the South to take slaves from the plantations because of his principles. He said there's integrity in what we do. But if someone needs help because they've left a bad situation, we're going to help them. What principle are you operating on? What principle is your office operating on? A lot of times we want to say we're doing the right thing, but we may not be. And we have to re-examine everything that we do. Bless you. We have to think about our values. What are we doing and why? You know, we've very much gotten into a principle AL society as a principle LE society. Everything's becoming money driven, and we all know no matter what faith, Christianity, non-Christianity, whatever it is, you know when you chase money, it's a bad situation. When you start worshiping it. it's a troublesome situation. So those principles were ever present on the Underground Railroad, even with fathers and their children. A lot of the fathers risked their lives, but their children did too. A gentleman named John Rankin, whose home still stands in Ripley, Ohio, up on a tall hill that overlooks the Ohio River. He and his wife and his children aided strangers whenever possible. And the home is really remarkable that it's still there, and there's a staircase that leads down to the Ohio River. Now then, of course, the Ohio River wasn't as deep or as wide. Because you look at it today and you go, there's no way. You are correct. But we're talking about more than 100 years ago. So at that time, they could get across. And John Rankin was on the riverbank, as well as an African-American man named John Parker, whose home is also there as a historic home. And John Parker had several businesses burned to the ground. He was an entrepreneur. He had patents through another lawyer, because at the time African-Americans could not apply for patents, but he had it through a friend who put it in his name, and it was protected. I don't know how they did it, but it was protected. He had children, and for those who are as old as I am, what was Muhammad Ali's real name? One of his children, John Parker's children, was named Cassius Clay after an abolitionist. So it was not a slave name. That name in particular had honor to it, which I thought was very interesting. I wondered, did his dad tell him that at the time, and he just decided still to change it, which is fine. But it was interesting to see the history of that. But John Parker didn't want any of his children not to succeed and to have their businesses destroyed, so every last one of them earned their degrees, which I thought was fascinating during that time as women and men, because he had boys and girls. So, principle. We look on the internet. How is that principle of freedom? Well, you think about Twitter. Twitter is a broadcast network. It's international. And now your tweets are archived by the Library of Congress. How many of you knew that? Because why? Why do you think the U.S. government would want to archive tweets? She said make it easier for the NSA. But to monitor revolutions. It's for safety. Safety and security. Valid question. Safety and security is the reason that tweets are archived. But a lot of people, again, don't understand that. Everything online is public and permanent. Your email, your inbox, I don't care if it's private. If it says it's private, it's not. Everything is public. Facebook can search your inbox. And now with the changes on Facebook, your inbox is searchable. So even pictures that we hide, that ugly picture with me with every zit I could ever have, hair looking sideways because I had a bad Jerry curl. Oh yeah, that picture's out there. That just hurts. It just hurts. Classmates. As I tell people, oh, I'm not online. Yes, you are. Did you go to grade school? Yes, then you're online. Because your classmates, God bless them, every time will put something up there. Oh, we just want to keep you humble. I'm like, you just want to stay broke. I'm the cash cow. Bet on me to win, boo, and I'm going to forget about you. Keep playing with me, putting them old pictures up there with the afro. Really? Are you kidding me? So, principle. We have to have something that we stand on, something that we stand for. So the internet also stands on this notion of freedom and access. When Tim Berners-Lee created what we call the World Wide Web, the internet is the actual wire buried underground. It's often referred to as the network of computers, how the computers are connected to each other. That's the internet. But we talk about the World Wide Web with Tim Berners-Lee, we're more so talking about the ability to search information, to add documents to information, pictures, etc. Okay? Anybody learn anything today? Is class in session? Yes. All right, good. All right. Questions, comments, thoughts so far? Because I'll get going. And you see, I don't necessarily need all the other stuff. And I tell people, if you know your stuff, and tell my students all the time, if you know what you know what you know, you can share that information in a sincere way. And please tell people, this girl is turning it out without electronics. Because people think, your technology. No. God's grace, it's in my head and in my heart. I know what I'm saying. So if it breaks, I'm okay. So, but we will take a comedic break shortly. Y'all ready for a comedic break shortly? Louis C.K., everyone, Louis C.K. Now, mind you, that was put on Facebook without NBC's permission years ago. NBC pulled it, they thought. But once it's in social media, you can't pull it. It was a blessing for Louis C.K. because most people had never heard of this man. But because of this video, a lot of people started paying attention to him. So I do that dual purpose, and also to break up monotony, because like I said, when you're just sitting, you can't just sit. And I tell everybody, you need to walk. We've got to walk more. We weren't made to sit. There's a great book by John Medina called Brain Rules, and it just talks about our evolution, thinking, learning, not exercising, and how it's affected our bodies. You know, going from walking to horseback to cars, et cetera, it had a negative impact on us. And that's why many of us are on vitamin D, et cetera. You need sun, which is crazy, because back in the day, people used to take care of the farm before they went to work. Okay, anyway, I'm dating myself. I'm not that old. No, I don't remember an outhouse. My grandmother's house. So, principle, where are we next? Purpose, direction, goal. Where are you headed? Personally, as an organization. The slaves knew what was ahead of them was better than where they were. It's a powerful moment in time. Innovate is a code word for faith. This whole book is a spiritual book, but I never mention spirituality because you're trying to reach people like Randy Pausch did in the last lecture with that head fake. So hopefully this head fake is successful. When you begin to think about purpose, they knew about Canada because the soldiers had come back from war and mentioned the promised land. It wasn't heaven, it was Canada. You know, a lot of people don't know that. They think, oh, the promised land, they bound for Mount Zion way on the hill. No, back then they were talking about getting to Canada. They wanted to get away from Massa's whip, away from the degradation, the humiliation, the abuse. You know, I laugh all the time from a biological standpoint. I said, you know, the slave power was real smart, but they didn't understand biology because if you mix a white master and a black slave, you're going to get black children. People say, oh, how do we get all these colors in America? We're all multicultural. Well, there's a reason for that. And the American Indians, who were abused as well. But these are stories we don't like to discuss. So when people say things now and they say, oh, I can't believe that happened. I can. We've been doing this to each other. This is not new. Oh, they're so mean. Really? What was more mean than people minding their own business in another continent, dropped on a ship, brought across the water, humiliated, lost their culture, lost their language? And these are kings and queens over there who had skills, knew how to do things other people didn't know how to do. So we talk about purpose. We have to have some place that we're going that's worthy of the trip. Where are you going that's worthy of your trip? I know, it's a deep question. That's the first time it came to me that way. Somebody write that one down. I hadn't said that before. I'm spiritually led. What I say truly is from God. A lot of times I tell people, they think I'm joking. I can't repeat half the things I say sometimes because it's not me. And it's like, I'll repeat that. Oh, you better have caught it because I can't repeat it. So purpose. So when you think about the Underground Railroad, you think about their direction, you think about their intent, you think about their determination. We look at the internet as it's growing and expanding and evolving. We have to look at what is the goal? Where are we headed? How should we leverage this digital tool during revolutionary times? And these are questions we normally don't ask because a lot of us will say, internet's dumb, Twitter's stupid, I don't like this, I don't like that. Nobody cares about you anymore. Ice Age isn't just a movie for entertainment. I know that's deep, isn't it? Dinosaurs die, one way or another. And it's not nice, but it's true now especially. So you can lock up like that obstinate 2-year-old kid and have that tantrum. These young boys just walking over folk. They're walking over people. Your Googles of the world, your Larry Page and Sergey Brin and your Jack Dorseys and Evan Williams who did Twitter, they're not caring about what you're saying. Had Steve Jobs lived, his goal was to disrupt the textbook industry, which was created as a moneymaker with public education. History's a mug when you start to read it. The challenge is we've got to read again and understand where we've come from, to understand where we are, to have a better idea of where we're headed. So goal and purpose are intertwined when you look at the Underground Railroad as a network and the internet as a network. I can take emotions wherever they need to go, can't I? Because it's deep when you really start to think. We're going to get into my deep area, perspective. Mindset, as we talk about dinosaurs. That mindset is really critical, and I should have pulled up another document that I found this week that I shared on LinkedIn, and it was about dinosaurs. I'm going to pull it up as I'm setting up perspective. Which way you're looking determines which way you will go. You have the big mirror in the car, the front window in the car, so that you can look out. The small rearview mirror. You've heard many religion professionals, professors, ministers, etc., talk about the little rearview mirror. It's small because you're not supposed to look back. Don't look back. You've got to see what's in front of you. That perspective killed the slave power, because the slave power kept getting caught looking this way, because they wanted King Cotton to rise again after they had raped the land and reaped out a season. I'll let that sit. When you take something that isn't yours, it isn't going to prosper. When you do things when it isn't your turn, it isn't going to prosper. When you take something that belongs to somebody else, it isn't going to prosper. But they insisted that King Cotton would rise again, when it was fundamentally impossible to do so because you had mistreated the land. You didn't understand the seasons. You know, I told everybody, oh, it was a rough winter. I said, I'm fine with winter as long as it stays in this season. It's supposed to be cold. It's supposed to snow. This is supposed to happen right now. Now, if it snows now, I'm nervous. I'm genuinely concerned about that being out of season. The North looked forward. They understood the industry. They understood what was coming. They integrated the immigrants not only into the factories, but into the war, because many of the immigrants knew how to fight. You had people coming in from Ireland, Poland, Italy, etc. They had experience fighting. So if you had to go to the Civil War, you wanted these people on your team. As I sat on the battlefield at Gettysburg, another thing that came to me that I learned that was very interesting was 3 days before the most critical battle at Gettysburg, then President Lincoln changed leadership. The Union general was switched 3 days before a major war. Who should have won that war? Who should have won that battle? The Confederacy, they should have won, because you switched leadership 3 days before he switched out General Hooker for General Meade. Now, on the Confederacy side, what had happened was Stonewall Jackson died. General Stonewall Jackson was killed by friendly fire at Chancellorsville, Virginia. My historians in the house, do I have it right so far? Because I know, I'm like, I got to stay on it, I'm going to stay on it. But Jackson was killed by friendly fire. Stonewall Jackson was the type of leader who got the job done. He got results. The men did not want to disappoint Stonewall. So if Stonewall said, go kill everything you see, they killed everything they saw. General Lee was like Wimpy asking for a cheeseburger. General Lee was the type of person, he was a Southern gentleman. So his thing was, if it would be prudent, if it would be, possible, could you please, and that demeanor changed also, the Southern side. So on the Northern side, Union side, another thing caught my attention, which was General Meade took an assessment from all of his soldiers, all of his troops. He didn't just say senior leaders. He didn't just say those with umpteen years of experience or what have you, give me your assessment. No, he asked everybody. He wanted to know how the men were in terms of injuries. He wanted to know supplies. He wanted to know exhaustion. He asked every possible question so he could make an informed decision about how to proceed in this battle. Fast forward, analog and digital. As we go forward with this digital revolution, and you just saw statistics in a first video that probably shocked many of you. As we go forward, does it behoove us online to shut our eyes to the reality of what's happening? On the Underground Railroad, the enslaved Africans could not believe what people told them. You're dumb, you're ugly, you're insignificant, you're incapable of thinking. You don't belong here. I don't know why God created you. You're an animal, you're a dog. This is all day, every day. But their perspective, they realized we are valuable from within. It became an internal motivation, as Daniel Pink talks about in his book, Drive. He says the carrot and stick no longer work. It never really worked in the beginning, this notion of reward and punishment. But now we need to go towards autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Perspective. What are you thinking? What is your mindset? Are you the one in the room that is constantly saying what can't be done, or are you the one that says what can be done? Are you the dinosaur that says, we've always done it this way? It's tight, but it's right. Trust when I tell you this. So I'm going to pull up this article real quick without my glasses, right? I'm going to try to pull it. I'm going to get them to read it to you. But the dinosaur characteristics are really critical. And like I said, I just did this week, so I've got to find it. Oh, there it is. All my friends were like, love this. Okay, let's see. Where did I send the original article? And it came from an institute. I laughed because I didn't do the research on the institute. I said, Lord, please don't let this be a questionable institute. But the concepts are great. Thank you so much. Host 40, the elasticity in your eyes will change, even if you have 20/20 vision. Now I know why my dad wore glasses. All right, so here are the traits of a dinosaur. Dinosaur leaders have a natural tendency to resist change. Dinosaur leaders have a severe case of nearsightedness, no vision for the future. They tend to be critical of innovations or changes of any kind, are usually paralyzed by fear at the slightest idea or mention of change. Dinosaur leaders would rather play it safe than sorry. They fear making mistakes of any kind. Somebody should be saying ouch right through here. Dinosaur leaders usually lack knowledge and skills required to lead change. Dinosaur leaders judge things on the merit of what is best for them, not the followers. Dinosaur leaders tend to be negative and pessimistic about new proposals or ideas for change, tend to belittle and laugh at new ideas or suggestions for change. Dinosaur leaders have nightmares instead of positive dreams about a bright future. They enjoy living in the comfort zone where boats are not rocked. And dinosaur leaders tend to dwell on the past and the good old days rather than today and the future.
Dinosaur leaders become extinct.
Amen. Now, like I said, Ice Age. It's not just entertainment. You've got to think through this. What scares me the most right now is just from a historical perspective, history's not going to be kind to us because we're the most educated generation in history. We have the most resources, we have the most information, we have the most of everything. But yet we have a challenge with change, a serious challenge. And we think about perspective. What's the definition of insanity? Moving on to pioneering. If the enslaved Africans had done the same things over and over again, they would have been killed. Each escape had to be unique. When Henry Box Brown, I mentioned in the beginning, was shipped from Richmond to Philadelphia, it was unique. When the next slave did it, he was caught. So they had to be enterprising. They had to realize if I'm going down one path and the conductors and agents along the Underground Railroad are leading me, and then all of a sudden, 28 slaves showed up on Levi Coffin at one time. He didn't have any idea how these people made it together in a band of people without being caught. But they got to him and they were on the verge of being caught. He put them in a funeral procession. Now, mind you, he wasn't the one that made coffins. Even though his last name is Levi Coffin, a lot of people mistake and say he was in the funeral business, but he wasn't. There was another family that was, and they hid slaves in coffins as well, but it wasn't Levi Coffin. So that was educational as well. But to think that quick of how to organize a flash mob, that's deep, isn't it? We start thinking about the internet, it's like, oh my gosh, a group of disconnected people connected for an epic win. And we'll talk about game dynamic in a moment. But pioneering. So you had to be original. What are you doing in your life that's original, that's unique? For you personally, for you professionally, what's really going on? Because at this juncture, we need to be asking those types of original questions. How are you being innovative? How are you being entrepreneurial? What are you creating? Not just for yourselves, but for those who are coming behind us. Because they still need boundaries. I tell my students all the time, okay, yes, you can Google what's in my brain in 2 minutes, but you can't get the wisdom that quick. And that's what we still, as veterans, have to leverage is the wisdom and the context. You can have content all day but not know what to do with it, and you can't necessarily connect it to our historical memory because we learn different things in school, different ways. And I'm kind of saddened now as I find out it's been totally watered down, like each generation is really learning less about history, which is terrifying, a la 1984 George Orwell. All right, pioneering. What else do I have back there, Maestro? What video do I have? Oh, yeah, pioneering. We got to show the baseball. Some of you remember this. If you are constantly looking for someone to come in a linear line, you'll never be ready for that. And he was safe because he stayed in the plane. Now, of course, they're trying to make rules where that won't be accepted. But it was phenomenal to see and to imagine someone wanting to win that bad, to be that close, to do whatever it is necessary to be successful. But in an analog world, it's hard for us to see digital because we don't comprehend it. It doesn't make sense. Twitter is stupid. I hate Twitter. I heard that forever. I was an early adopter, made fun of, demonized, talked about, ridiculed, everything under the sun. Now people are talking to me like Twitter's new because they're on it. They finally got on it, so it's new. And I'm going, it's a mouth to the side moment. Like, really? Really? Are you kidding me? But it's important to embrace change. We don't have a choice but to be more pioneering, to be more creative. There's two wonderful videos out there that I use in my classes with Sir Ken Robinson as well. So if you want to look at his take on creativity, and they're drawing with him talking, that's the one I'm talking about. So that's pioneering. Was that not pioneering? Was that not like a great example of something original? On the Underground Railroad, you had some escapes where you could smell the stench of the slaves. Well, one of the wives of those who helped friends along the way put smoked ham on the wagons to cover the smell. And there are just all these innovative ways of escape. William and Ellen Craft. Ellen was a product of one of those biological accidents where she appeared white. Wonder how a black person appears white. Go figure. But she could pass for white, and her husband pretended to be the slave, escorting his husband, because they dressed her up as a man. So she dressed up as a man and passed for white and had her husband escort her. Of course, others who attempted that weren't as successful because it was pioneering the first time. So even as we look at churches, religious organizations going forward, we have to think differently. I was sharing with my pastor the other night. I said, you know what? Instead of just sitting in here for Bible study, let's go play softball. And a run doesn't count unless you can quote a scripture. If you can't quote, answer the question from Sunday school, the run doesn't count. I promise you, people read that Sunday school book then. Because we're sports, we'll be competitive in sports. But it makes us think differently and adds to our health and to our happiness and to your smiles and into your joy. So think in a pioneering fashion. What's next? Ooh, you had to be passionate to walk off a plantation in Georgia and walk to Canada. And some of us don't want to walk to the car. Right? These are not fictional accounts. Some enslaved Africans walked from the South to Canada. Yes, they may have gotten rides in wagons, etc., but for the most part, they were walking by faith, blind faith, into the unknown to take this risk. That's passion. Many of the innovations that we see on the internet today were passionate all night, weeks of all night, staying up all night. Of course, most are men. Most are not married, no children, so they don't have to worry about getting a bath. Some of these books you read, you go, for real? Ew. But they all stayed in these rooms or the apartment rooms, and they programmed and they built these systems, and we keep getting mobile apps and we keep getting websites and we keep getting all these new innovations because there are people who are willing and who are passionate enough to stay focused enough to get it done. What is your passion? What will you do all night for yourselves, personally, professionally, as well as spiritually? Look at your spiritual organizations as well if they're not one and the same, so to speak, with your profession. But we have to start thinking more and using the internet as leverage to get inspiration. Instead of always hating, emulate. Stop hating. Emulate. How can I use that in a more meaningful way? If I feel something's unethical, how can I make it ethical and relevant to what I'm doing? And sometimes the answer is, I can't. And that's okay, you keep moving. But you don't want to keep looking over ideas and opportunities as they keep surfacing. Play, all right? Strategy. How in the world did she come up with play when you talk about slavery? Now the irony, tragic irony, is there was a mobile a video game of slavery, but they banned it. But if you start to think about voluntary participation, feedback, rules, timing, strategy, that's what the Underground Railroad was. Some historians argue it did help lead to the Civil War, because coming off the 1793 Fugitive Slave Law and then the 1850 Fugitive Slave Law, the Underground Railroad strengthened because they had shut down the Northerners who were helping free blacks. and then you saw the movie 12 Years a Slave, which was fictional, but based on a real story, you know, there were many, bless you, free blacks who were arrested and taken into captivity and made slaves. You had an entire plantation that was released upon the death of the owner in Virginia. That group of slaves ended up in Ohio because Virginia enacted a law that said free blacks could not reside there more than a year after they were free, because they didn't want the enslaved blacks to get any ideas. Kind of like reading, you know, getting your eyes gouged out because you learned how to read. When Frederick Bailey's owner's wife taught him how to read, she was chastised when the owner found out, because she taught him how to read. And he said, you can't teach them how to read. If you teach them how to read, they'll want freedom. So, problem, principle, purpose, perspective, pioneering, passion, and play. Those are Dr. Sybr's 7 elements of innovation that I use to outline this book. Now, you guys ready for some competition? All right. Here are some things that you can take back to your respective offices, homes, etc. So, no judgment. Turn around so you guys work together at the table. I'm going to give you 60 seconds. This is going to help you tremendously, personally and professionally. And I'm getting my timer set. 60 seconds or less. Write down, have one person write. Identify that person now. Point somebody out quick. Who's going to write? Okay. As long as you make that determination, we're good. 60 seconds or less. Name all of the ways a mega minister or ministry make money. Go. All of the ways a mega minister or ministry makes money. Go, go, go. Anybody got more than 15? I'm hearing 15. 17. It's an easy assignment, is it not? Give me one from this table, and everybody do a different one. One from this table. Books. Facilities. Speaking. Up here. Promotional items. Grants. Yeah, begging, right? Is that table back there? Okay, y'all represent it. What up here?
Stock market.
Yeah. Did y'all have one? Okay, that's right, you did. Over here?
Coffee shop.
Yeah, coffee shop. And back there they said begging. What's back there in the corner? Which begging is offering. Absolutely. Now, we're going to make this multifold right here. 2 questions. The first one, how many sources of income do you have coming in? I know, it is ouch. That's one. And then in terms of communication, how many ways are you disseminating your information? Because the same model applies to how you disseminate information. Now, what if I asked you, how many ways do they make money off of one sermon? Somebody yell out, how do you make money off of a sermon? Book, video. Look, see, you fire. Big Mama and them still want a cassette. Big Mama and them still want a VHS flashing 12 o'clock. DVD, CD, book, play, video, offerings. I heard reality TV, podcasting, rock opera. But you get the point. So they are disseminating their information on all these platforms. We, as communicators, have to do the same thing on a continuous basis. It's not to say that I'm going to do 5,000 cassette tapes. Those are made to order, so I'm only going to do enough for people to have access to that. But when you want something, you want it the way you want it. But when we think about other people, we don't think the same way. It's like they want that information the way they want it. If I'm running to the gym and I want it on a blasted podcast so I can listen to that sermon, I want to have access to that. If I want to watch it on a YouTube video, I want to have access to that when I want it. If I want the transcript of the sermon can make money too, because you could put a booklet of just the transcript. So you've got all these different ways that we need to be considering communication. On the Underground Railroad, see, I brought it all back, didn't I? You see that real quick? The ways of escape, again, were multifaceted because they had to be. You had to have that flexibility. But there's intentionality in what we do. We have to be very mindful, present in the moment. Because right now, a lot of us are letting our angst, our anger, our frustration, because it feels like we arrived at a door and they changed the address. Now, here I sit with an earned PhD, and I fight against the Snookies of the world. I'm serious. Rutgers paid Snooki $32,000. Yes, ma'am. You have to Google that. Yeah, Snooki and Rutgers, that's real. And it's not hating on her. Well, yeah, I am. Well, I mean, I'm trying not to. You're trying not to hate on her because it's not her. She didn't do it. It's the culture. But it's motivation for me. And to value yourself, because if they're going to value themselves like that, I'm like, hold up, player. I've been in school for more than 20 years. So it becomes a self-valuation. That's why I said don't hate on the mega minister or the mega ministry. Learn from it. They're recession-proof because during the recession, they made more money. So with that, I will entertain questions that you may have. Anybody? Yes?
How do you, as you diversify yourself, find balance in maintaining all these various different streams of you and your friends?
You don't. You don't. I mean, it's such a good question. When I need to shut down, I shut down. You know, when I'm tired and I've had enough, I shut it down. It's hard. I mean, it's hard. I'm very blessed. This semester I'm on sabbatical. I've been a professor at Belmont for 11 years. I became a full professor in August, and I'm not teaching this semester. God's grace be back August 1st. And even with this downtime, you know, I don't understand how these people are doing all this stuff 24/7 online, so to speak. So it's a balance. For me, again, intentionality. I do what I'm passionate about. I focus on what I love. And it may change from day to day, you know, but I try to finish each project. So my next project will be my audiobook. So I've got a Kickstarter campaign that I'm going to put up either next month. Well, this is April. This is next month. This month or next month, so to speak, and get that done. But taking the elephant one bite at a time, honoring what I truly love, because if I don't like it, I'm not doing it anymore. Not in the sense of, and that young people get this twisted, I've sacrificed and paid my dues. So I know there were times I had to do jobs I didn't necessarily care for. You know, making hospital IV bags definitely made me go back to school and make the honor roll. 8 hours. I'm gonna get A's when I get back to school, I promise. You know, hats off to factory workers. I have that much respect, immense respect. But I know my limitations and I know my boundaries. I tell people if you want to write during the time of day that you're a good writer. I'm a morning person. Don't ask me to do anything after 9 o'clock at night. I'm going to be cross and crazy. If I'm going out at night, I have to take my nap. If I don't get a nap, I'm not going anywhere. Because at night, I'm just not a night person. So understanding who you are, understanding where you're going, understanding what you want to do, and understanding what's okay in terms of the accomplishment. I lowered my bar because the bar was always so high I couldn't finish things because it had to be a certain way. Coming out of Catholic school, you know, we were taught you do it this way. And my mother and father and all of that. And so it's hard to just do good enough when your whole life you were beaten into, you better be the best, so to speak. Now, my mom always says, and still says, do your best. Be the best you can be. And that's always been helpful to me. But in spite of her saying that, the other message in my head was you got to be the best. And that's going to kill you. But in terms of timing, you figure out what time of day works for you, whether it's writing, whether it's social media. You figure out what your projects are going to be. 3 things. Keep your to-do list down to 3 things, because if they get longer, they're too overwhelming to finish. Yes?
One a phrase of yours that really caught my attention was you said people want information the way they want it.
Yes, ma'am.
Within my organization, specifically, a large part of the tension is between younger people who think that the only thing that has any effectiveness is the Twitter, the so-and-so and so, and that you don't need longer forms of journalism to disseminate information, the print stuff, okay? And obviously, and probably all of our staffs have a lot of people, they're older people who are former journalists. How do you decrease the tension between those who think that the new stuff, which we know is important and is leading us toward the future, is the only thing?
Do both. It's just an and. It's a hybrid moment. Because people think we consume more. I consume more on this device than I ever did. Because I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn. People are sharing information with me. I'm reading articles from the New York Times, from the Guardian, in my hand. So before, I don't even turn on the TV hardly anymore. And I know that's very shocking on the woman who grew up on Gilligan's Island, Brady Bunch, Jefferson's Good Times. I could name it all. Just looking out of the window. Oh, I'm sorry, okay. But I can go there. And it's one of those things where having grown up on all that and being so indoctrinated in TV, it's kind of strange not to wake up, turn on TV, but I don't, very rarely. I'm at that point now. I cut down cable a couple months ago and saving like $75 a month. I still have it, I just don't have what we had before, and I'm still whittling down to make that decision. But in terms of, people still want information the way they want it. Again, there's a nice number of us who still read long-form journalism, but it's a timing issue and it's a placement issue, because most of the time I'm running. I'm not in front of a laptop anymore. I'm on a mobile device. So you've got to whet my appetite enough, not only for me to kind of skim that article while I'm on the run, but also to put a bookmark on it or to email it, to share it at another time. And that's our issue. Now, publications like the Business Insider, The Atlantic, etc., they figured out how to do that. People are reading long-form information. It just depends how it is packaged. And we have to think about the end user, not ourselves. Because that's been the issue. We do stuff for us. We've got to figure out how to do stuff for other people, and that's everybody, myself included. Yes, sir?
What suggestions do you have for pushing institutions forward when the end users are not there with digital, just the digital world that we live in? I think about the way that I actually function, then for my job I step away from there a few steps for my audience. So we'd like to push us forward.
I say leverage narcissism. And I don't mean the negative narcissism. I mean healthy narcissism. Oh, my next work that I'm going to deal with, possibly, I've got 3,000 of them, but one of the things I want to deal with in article form, the selfie, oh, the selfie, oh, the selfie. Go visit the Belmont plantation and you'll see selfies. The bigger the portrait was, the more money the person had. That's why they put pictures of themselves in the home. So stop judging before you read and know what you're talking about. I saw a selfie down in South Carolina. It's a statue of John C. Calhoun. It's the tallest thing I've seen in my life. It goes straight up in the air with a picture of him standing on top. We've always had a self-esteem issue. Always. So we can't demonize this generation and act like it's brand new. So that's part of it. But when I say healthy narcissism, interview people. Leverage their wisdom. A lot of people who are older don't realize how their stories can be shared and valued in greater ways. So incorporate them into the stories, into the ideas in different ways. And when they see themselves, they go, oh, wow. And then people start asking questions and giving them the respect that they deserve. Then they start to come around little by little. And then taking the time. I teach social media to that population because I respect them. I am them. But I just understand I can't survive without this tool. And so when you start to talk about Twitter, talking with people as opposed to talking down to them is a huge difference. So taking the time, even if you found a small tutorial on YouTube and you said during a staff meeting, let's look at this together. Because some people are just so intimidated because you want to feel smart. We're all groomed. We want to be intelligent. You don't want to be in a room where you just feel totally lost. It's the worst feeling in the world. So you really got to encourage people. So that's why I said the healthy narcissism. But asking them questions, using their wisdom in the social media space, and then showing them how you're using their wisdom. That's one way. It's not easy. My father's favorite phrase, and I laughed the other day as I reflect on it, you can take a horse to water, you can't make it drink, which was him, which is hilarious as you look at it in hindsight. But we can tell people about this stuff all day. I tell people all day. Harriet Tubman told slaves, come on. She left her husband. She went back to get him. He had married another slave and stayed in slavery. I know that's deep, isn't it? That's deep. I was like, I just shot him. I'm sorry. Okay, that's just me. I done came all the way back here to get you for real? So some people, we're going to have to leave some people behind. I mean, that's where I'm at now because I see it, I realize it, and I'm going, look, this isn't going away. And if you love, and I always play to the grandparents. How many of you have grandchildren? How many of you want them to succeed? See, it's not about us anymore. These kids, what they say about the kindergartners and iPads. You know, whether we like it or not, and some things I don't like. Trust me. All the dues we paid, and you jokers don't have to do anything? Are you kidding me? You put up a crazy YouTube video and get 10 million hits, and now you're off and on your way, and we've worked, you know, so it's frustrating. But from the biblical perspective, you think about Matthew talking about the talents and the workers, whether the worker worked all day or whether the worker came up in the end, they all got the same. So again, bless you, you have to think through some things and make peace with some things. But don't you give up. You keep training yourself. You know you need to know what you know. And those skills are going to come in handy for those who learn them. I had no idea when I was blessed to embark on this journey in terms of convergence. That's what I left News Channel 5 for in 2003 to work at Belmont. I had no idea all of this was coming. I was on the beginning of it. I had a blog. I didn't know what a blog really was in 2003. Bill Hobbs was at Belmont then, and that's who turned me on to blogging. He said, Sib, we need to bring in this conference, Blog Nashville. We did that. Next thing I know, we had Glenn Reynolds of Instapundit, and all of a sudden, I'm in this arena. And I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I'm just being honest. I mean, I'm new. I'm fresh. I'm like, I don't know what the heck's going on. But you just keep moving. You know, and I learn what I can learn. I can't do websites. WordPress, I can't program websites. That's not my strength. My strength is speaking, encouraging, inspiring, educating. So I try to stay in my lane. And that's what I talk about with passion. That's important. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What are your thoughts on ebooks?
Ebooks are awesome. Ebooks are your business card. Because my book now is an ebook, and the next projects that I'm going to work on, I hit a button, I'm sorry. The next projects that I will work on will be ebooks, a bunch of them. Because they're revenue streams. Didn't I just tell y'all about income? Didn't I just tell you that? You want something that's going to make money while you sleep. Books people can buy online, whether books, ebooks, real estate, stock. You need stuff that constantly sends you revenue while you're asleep. That's important. And I look at money as a tool to reach the people I want to reach. You know, I'm not getting money in order to do the things some other people have done, and that's their right. It's theirs. People choose to do what they want to do. I do it different. You know, I imagine a school, I've got all these things in your head that you'd love to do. But the ebooks are powerful, and they're faster. One of the things, this book is 150 pages, deliberately. I wanted you to be able to read this in a weekend, on a plane. I wanted you to have that sense of accomplishment. Steve Jobs' autobiography was 600 pages. And I read it because I'm a geek. But had they done 4 books, 150 pages each, they would have increased their revenue stream, increased the audience, and increased that satisfaction of finishing a project. So I love ebooks because if you're looking at 50 to 100 pages. The other day I was looking at what successful people do in the morning at breakfast time, and there's a book that was $2.99. So I bought it not realizing it was so short because I read the whole thing that morning. It was like 30, 35 pages. And I thought, oh, and I got what I needed, and I was happy. So again, if you look at that iTunes model, which is what most people don't like to consider, iTunes works because you've got billions of people downloading. That's billions of dollars. Our old model was let me charge as much as I can so I can get all I can get out of the turnip up front. That's not realistic. It's dumb. I've said, you know, different organizations, if it's your 100th anniversary, and some of y'all will feel where I'm at with this, do your membership for $100 during that one anniversary and you'll make millions. One time only, you can rejoin this organization for $100. Excuse me. Y'all will understand what I'm saying. Okay? I hear you. I hear you, sisters. But y'all get what I'm saying. All them 100 anniversaries hit. I'm talking about sororities and fraternities, because all these 100-year anniversaries hit, and I'm going, you should have just eliminated membership dues for that one finite period of time. You would have got everybody else back in, and you keep people going. Sherilyn, I saw you had a question too. My former co-worker at Channel 5, who I'm happy to see.
So you all go to social media. What are biggest mistakes you see organizations make in their use of social media?
Being afraid of it, not utilizing it. Also, if they post something that they don't like, they remove it. That doesn't work. People have already taken a picture of it. The book, Gary Vaynerchuk has a great book called Crush It. And there's another one, because I listened to one on tape and I read one, and I can't think of all of them, but Gary Vaynerchuk is a beast. in terms of social media and understanding what goes behind it. Eric Qualman also. But fundamentally, we're afraid of it and we don't use it intentionally. Older people tend to be very cryptic. You know, a lot of times we're not as personable because that's just not our nature per se, because we've been taught to be private. You've got to be authentic, you've got to be transparent, you've got to be consistent. If you're going to have a blog and you say, I'm going to be there every Monday morning, you need to be there when people come to see you every Monday morning. So that consistency is critical. Human, just being human. You know, we have opportunities to connect. In television news, part of what we do locally is connect to national news stories. So even out there with your organizations, you can connect to national news stories in meaningful ways and share your information. You know, how does your value system in your organization and your ethics connect to whatever that idea or issue is? Because right now, we're suffering from an ethical dilemma. It's like our ethics are gone. Our politicians have lost their minds. You know, you want to just go up there and smack them on the hand, and you know better than that. You know, somebody taught you to act better than that, taking pictures in the bathroom of your wee-wee. What's wrong with you? Last question.
My question is, when you were speaking about your book and how you kind of drew the conclusions between Underground Railroad and Internet, those are two two things that you were able to make those connections. And I feel like as faith leaders and faith communicators, sometimes we have to be creative about how we tell our stories. So do you have any suggestions about how to get creative in drawing conclusions for people that are relatable, but not necessarily so, direct in terms of, the Bible quoting just scriptures or things that are already.
Read. A lot of people are seeing all these names out there, like I mentioned, you know, the Chris Andersons and Seth Godin, Jeff Jarvis, and Malcolm Gladwell, etc. But people aren't really reading. Because you look at Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath. Read that for ideas. He connected that to the scriptures, the underdog and the giant. And it's what we're dealing with dinosaurs too, unfortunately. And I love dinosaurs, trust me, I've worked for many, and I love them dearly. But I have to eat that nasty habit I picked up at birth. I'm going to continue eating. So while you sitting back there looking simple, sister will eat. So reading, interviewing people, connecting, following people who are good writers. The one thing I love about reading the stories from The Atlantic and The New Yorker and Business Insider, et cetera, and Guardian, they're good writers. And so once I start to see good storytelling, then you start to emulate that as well. You know, telling my students no plagiarism, but you emulate that which is good. Does that make sense? So really following. You know, right now we're in a blessed situation in terms of being able to have virtual mentors. People be mentors, they don't even know they're mentoring you. But you find great writers. You know, Oprah's one of my mentors. She doesn't even know it. I followed her my whole life. I've interned at ABC in Chicago when she was there, and I worked at Channel 5. So I figure one of these days it'll all come together. So I am authorized to say that I'm doing the books out front. So I have cash for $15. Because I have to do the square, it's $17.50 on credit card, but I'm happy to sign them. I tried to make them, again, short. I wanted them to be affordable because I want people to have access to the information, to the thinking behind it. So I want to thank Amelia, Carolyn, Brian. Where did Brian go? I'm blind. Your president. He was back there. So, but I want to thank you for having me. This is what I love to do. So if you would like to reach me, please feel free to do so because this is what I do. And I thank you very much for this opportunity.